It's Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. My name is Ashton Ellett, here with another installment of the Senate Staff Oral History Project, sponsored by the Richard B. Russell Library at the University of Georgia. I'm here today in Washington, D.C. with Mr. David Dunning. Mr. Dunning received his bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia's Grady School of Journalism before joining the Georgia Board of Industry and Trade and later the personal staff of Senator David H. Gambrell. He was most recently a partner at Oldacker Law Group, and prior to that, he was a consultant to Holland and Knight's Strategic Environmental Management Services Practice Group. In addition to his many other roles, Mr. Dunning has served as a consultant to Shaw Industries in its Green Edge Sustainable Products and Engineering Services Group. He's also spent some time working for the AARP as a legislative representative in the state and federal arenas. Mr. Dunning, Dave, thank you so much
Thank you, Ashton, for having me. I'm honored.
No, this is great. We've been trying to get together for a long time, and I'm glad we were finally, between COVID, this, that, and the other, it's been a long time coming. So let's jump right in. Tell me about your childhood and upbringing in Peach County, down in Middle Georgia.
Well, we were four of us children, and we weren't brought up in Peaches. My father got a job at Bluebird School Bus. Mm-hmm. And he went on to become the president of Wander Lodge, just one of the first large recreational vehicles.
Okay.
But all of us worked in Peaches, I guess. My twin sister is still in Peaches. My younger sister was in. My brother Peter was in Peaches. So there's only two things going on in Peach County. It's Bluebird School Bus and Peaches.
Right. Hence the name. So, how did you become interested in politics? How did you plan for a career in and around the political arena, or how did that happen?
That's we had an interesting guy in high school named Steve Dugan, and he became really close friends with Jimmy, who was a state senator, not yet Governor Carter, and I guess Dugan was an incredible reader.
Okay.
And he was on the debate club, and he got me on the debate club, and I wasn't as good as Steve, but it started me thinking, I guess, about politics.
Interesting. So you attended the University of Georgia. Mm-hmm. So tell me, what were you interested in studying? You got a degree in journalism?
I did. Well, I never thought I'd be a writer, but it was the dean of the school was a very colorful guy that passed away years ago, and I had a lot of friends that said, David, journalism could be a great venue. I once wrote also for a paper down in Hinesville, Georgia, so I guess it did. Bobby Branch was the managing editor, so it started me. But I've never had a career in journalism, but the Henry Grady School of Journalism, I met a lot of wonderful people.
Were you what sort of activities were you involved in? Where you UGA?
Tennis.
Tennis?
Thanks to Pierre Howard, I met.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I had the tennis thing. When I got there, I had played tennis at another college, and I was number one singles. And when I got to Georgia, I wasn't number one singles any longer. So I barely made the practice team, but Dan McGill was the director of tennis, and Pierre Howard made that introduction.
Okay. Okay, yeah, you're not the only Senate staffer who's a very good tennis. I think Rocky Reef from Senator Nunn's staff is also a Stanford tennis player. Yeah. So were you involved in politics when you were in college, or?
Well, I ran for the city council or the president's, and I was beat out by a baseball player.
Yeah.
And all my friends from Fort Valley, he was all the SAEs, and they said, David, you got to be down, just come up here. You can get re-involved. But I thought, at 2 years, I was tired of politics and college politics.
Right. Well, so tell me how you got involved in industry and trade after graduation, obviously.
I was looking for a job when I got out, and everybody was interviewing at Coca-Cola.
Right.
And I didn't get that job, and someone said, David, this is a great job. The welcome centers, you'd be great. Mm-hmm.
Bill Hardman.
It was Louis Truman, and I had a friend who's passed away a few years ago, Ed Levy was head of the film school, and he made all those Burt Reynolds movies. So that was part of our little team: travel, tourism, industry, and trade. and then I got a call to go to Washington, and that was a short stint.
Tell me about the story of how you went from industry and trade to Senate staff.
Well, I think it takes a lot of higher ups in big companies, and the Coca-Cola Company helped me get that job, and some others, but I would say the Coca-Cola Company knew the chief of staff of one of the senators, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, usually when we say Coca-Cola Company and we're talking Georgia politics, we mean Earl.
We would be speaking of Earl.
Well, Senator Russell passed away early 1971, and you were originally going to be on staff of Senator Russell's staff.
I had an official letter in my folder.
Well, and as we know, that didn't end up happening. Where were you when you found out that Senator Russell, your supposed to be boss, had passed away?
Well, it was on the day it happened. Someone said, David, he's getting a lie in state at the Capitol, at the Georgia Capitol. And I said,
Yep.
So this is as close as you're going to get. So make sure you're there.
Dark humor. So, how were you able to parlay that into a job on Senator Gambrell's staff?
I think it was just some. Again, it was a dear friend, Charles Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Listen, this was too bad. This was a close. It was a miss, and so David is deserving." So I met. I think it was Ted Hester,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually the Gambrell family, and we all got along.
So tell me about David Gambrell, who unless you really live and breathe Georgia politics, few people probably knew David Gambrell, or at least knew him as a senator. Tell me about your first impressions of Senator Gambrell.
Well, he was a Harvard-trained lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a very successful lawyer in Atlanta. And this was an instant a senator when the death of Senator Russell. So that's what happened, and he was thrust suddenly into becoming a public figure in the United States Senate.
Mm-hmm.
He immediately brought on a great staff, and not me, because I was a campaign person. And I was on the legislative area for a while, but mostly I worked on the campaign. I traveled with him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
But he was not a robust, handshaking fella, and not like Senator Talmadge and other people I had watched. But he learned to become a pretty good politician with county commissioners and mayors, and he traveled all over Georgia, and I think he got better at the job.
Yeah. So you did spend some time in Washington. What was your job when you were here in
I was
D.C.?
I don't know, it was the Senator Ted. He put me on the Space Committee. So, and go watch the floor votes and report back to me. So the legislative director, whatever committee you got, that was the call.
Right.
The senator voted, and he told the senator this is the issues. But there wasn't a lot of activity, but they did have a space launch there, and as a staff person, and I'll never forget this, Ashton, one of the first lessons in ethics, I think, was from Ted Hester. He said, we've all been invited to go to the space launch on a private jet and go to a fancy with a big paper company or something. And Ted said, I'm not going. And he said, the rest of you can go. We got some votes coming up. It's going to affect this. And it was a space launch, and every one of us. And I was working on the committee. I thought, I'm going to miss a space launch over an ethical thing. But that was my first lesson in ethics. It was from Ted on legislative staff. It's an important job.
To be above or beyond reproach?
Yeah.
Well, you talked about Ted and Charles Campbell. Who else were some of the folks you worked with on staff?
Well, Teresa, she was from a little town, I think, in Millen. She did casework and Social Security, and I can't think of her last name, but I'll just remember that the day-to-day, the work in addressing Social Security letters and helping people with agency problems. I mean, this is not glamorous work.
Right.
This is not advising the senator how to vote on the upcoming appropriate. This is stuff that people write in thousands and thousands of letters.
The casework.
For casework, and it's really an important job. It's constituent services.
Right. You were talking about how Senator Gambrell wasn't sort of a glad-handing, hail fellow, well met. Were you familiar with any of his relationships on Capitol Hill? Did he have close friends on the Hill, or was that something that you witnessed?
Well, Ted would know more than that, but I would monitor from the Senate staff gallery, and you'd see him. He really was good on the Senate floor with the senator from Michigan, the senators from Florida, and the senators from Senator Talmadge, but other senators. So he was always very active. I remember, so I'll just leave it. He was Ted, that was his department. I saw him as a very gregarious, friends with a lot of senators, because he had a high intellect.
Yeah. Well, when you were in the office in Washington, what was not that there is a typical day in the work of a senator, but what was a typical workday like for you when you were here in Washington?
Well, we were supposed to be there. I think it was at 9 o'clock, and then you'd look at committee hearings and who was going to go to what, and then that would take a whole day to go to the morning sessions and the afternoon sessions. It wasn't too glamorous, but my job was the legislating what committees were going on, and sit in the Senate gallery and read the congressional record and keep up with.
So, some offices, and again, every office is different. Some were really buttoned up, very serious, and others were less so. How would you describe Senator Gambrell's office?
Well, we had an administrative assistant that was had some Georgia political history. Mm-hmm. And he'd keep everything orderly. we were next to Senator Mac Mathias.
Oh yeah.
And there was another famous senator also in the building, Dirksen, mm-hmm. that was chairman of a powerful senator from Arkansas. And one time, their staff director, legislative guy, said, "David, there's whales and there's minnows. I work for a whale. You work right now for a minnow, but he's got promise."
Of course, he had to win election.
That was Senator McClellan's staff.
Oh, McClellan. Okay, I was like Fulbright, but
no, it was McClellan.
McClellan, but both would be whales. But McClellan definitely. What was the relationship like? Did you work closely with Senator Talmadge's staff at all?
Yes, I mean there was. When constituent groups would come up, chambers of commerce, mm-hmm. From various issues. I guess the biggest thing I worked on was the submarine base.
Oh,
Kings Bay.
Kings Bay.
And so all the county commissioners would call and said, so it was between three spots.
Right.
The state of Washington, Jacksonville, Florida, and little old Sunbury in Camden County. And there was this terribly good county commissioner that has passed away, Vernon Martin, and he'd say, "David, I'm bringing 18 county commissioners up here. This is life or death." And he said, "You guys got to help us." I said, "We'll do anything you can." But so it was a really tough battle between Jacksonville and the state of Washington. But that was the biggest thing I was ever. And Connell Stafford, mm-hmm. God love him. He was involved in it. Senator Nunn, of course.
Sure.
But when Georgia got Kings Bay, it started with our office, but it was a really big deal for Georgia.
Right. Well, I was just down on the coast with Jones Hooks, who was on staff with Bo Ginn, who was sent down to basically oversee all that. But that's interesting to talk about how, this appointed senator who was there for just a few, not even two whole years, how influential he was in something that is, just an anchor of economic development on the coast.
It was a pine tree county. They had nothing in Camden County.
It was just sort of that last stop on the way to Florida from Brunswick,
right,
or St. Simons. So, I don't mean this to besmirch anybody in Camden County. It still is a lot of pine trees.
It's a pretty big agriculture product for South Georgia.
That's right. It's one of the largest. Well, tell me about transitioning out of the committee staff and the Washington office to campaigning. Why did they send Dave Dunning?
Oh, I didn't do a very good job. I had an outgoing personality versus a Harvard-trained lawyer. Just a Peach County farm boy, and I had a lot of friends all over Middle Georgia, and we got along a lot. His wife liked me. Senator Gambrell's wife liked me, and that didn't. After that, it didn't matter. If she liked you, you were in good shape.
Right.
But we had a lot of good campaign stops together.
Well, tell me, what was it like? What was campaigning like back then?
Well, I had to drive the Senate car. It had USS 2 on it, and I was in charge of the car. And if we had a campaign event at 6:30 at a gate in Doraville at a GM plant, I had better be there at 6 o'clock. Boxes full of brochures.
Oh my gosh!
And so I most of the time made that, but I'll never forget the time we were going to Griffin, Georgia, and I was way late. And Senator, I've never seen him get mad, but he got mad on me on that day because we were late, and it never happened again. And then we got an airplane.
And you didn't fly the airplane.
We didn't. We had a pilot, and we had it was a great judge in Augusta, Albert Pickett.
I know Judge Pickett, yeah.
And Judge Pickett, he said, "David, where are you?" And we're at Charlie Brown. We haven't taken off. I said, Judge, I can't do anything about it. The center's like 10 minutes away. Planes, one propeller's going. And he said, "David, you do not know. I've got all this stuff arranged. And you're not. I'm not happy with you, David. Go get the senator and get in here, Richmond County Airport." So there was a lot of those nervous. You can't make everything happen because he was talking to people and he couldn't get into. He was a good politician once he learned his job.
So you think he really grew into?
I do.
Yeah.
I was there. I did.
So you weren't sort of the body man where you just went up and hugged the senator and just turned him towards the car. We've got to go now.
I'd be pointing the watch and saying, "This is really, we need to spin it up," and some of those. But no, he enjoyed being a politician.
On the one hand, that sounds like an absolutely fantastic experience, a great learning experience. We're sitting here years later talking about it. And on the other hand, that sounds absolutely horrible because you're not the master of your own fate because it's up to the member or the senator to make you look good because you can't do anything about it.
Well, there was just one great supporter in Cobb County named Conley Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I can't.
Judge Ingram,
and I can't seem to move. I said, we went out there and had a little come to Jesus one time. Judge Ingram straightened everything out because I can't. Senator, we really got to can't delay our friend in Augusta. And I think it was Judge Ingram leaned and said, David, you got to dial it in here. We're all trying to get you up in the air.
Well, tell me about that election night. Because there was a general election, primary. State Representative Nunn got into a runoff with the senator. Tell me about that runoff night when you found out that Senator Nunn had defeated Senator Gambrell?
This is the Tad. On my street, I still had my home, and I had all my roommates, and we lived in 3715 T Street, and I wasn't there, and my neighbor across the street was a campaign guy that we hired, not because of me, but he was pretty good, and I'll never forget the night the polls, 30 minutes before they closed. This guy, who later became a tennis friend of mine, and everybody says, David, Doug's leaving early. And I said, well, and I said, what are you doing? Oh, the air's going out of the room. He said, David, I'm looking at Bibb, and I'm looking at Cobb, I'm looking at Muskogee, and I'm looking at Richmond, and he said, I'm not feeling a pulse. And I thought, wow. And I just had a sinking feeling. Everybody said, David, where's your buddy going? I said, Elvis has left the building. And it hurt because I worked pretty hard, and God knows David Gambrell and everybody on the campaign staff, it was, but when that guy left, and he's a professional at it, he knows exit polls and stuff, I didn't feel good.
Well, he obviously was right. He had the measure of it. Well, tell me about, in politics, it's really cruel because one moment you're gainfully employed, working hard, and then the next minute you won't be, sooner rather than later. So tell me what that sort of life transition was like after the senator lost the nomination. I guess you knew the clock was ticking on your time in the Senate.
I took a long trip to Liberty County to see some old friends of mine. My buddy's daddy was a sheriff, and his granddaddy was a sheriff, and he said, David, go out and stay in the cabin for a while and get over it. And so it hurts when you work so hard, giving out so many brochures. Yeah, so it didn't take long for other things to happen.
Yeah.
But that was a hard loss.
What was the next step for you professionally? Did you move over to Senator Nunn's staff, or were you?
I was briefly on Senator Nunn's staff, but you lose. The new people come in.
Yeah. And
so, but it wasn't hard after that. I had had a lot of tennis friends, and then he had a job offer from the AARP. Now I'm a member, and I did state legislative stuff after that, and I didn't miss a beat. I loved it. I did it for over 10 years, and it was a lot of fun.
How do you think your work on the Senate staff, on the campaign, helped prepare you for your later career as a lobbyist, government affairs person? Well,
I think, I get young friends, new friends all the time. What do I need? You need a few years on the Hill to figure out how a bill gets made and how deals are cut and committee. You have to have a few years under your belt on Capitol Hill. Whether you have a law degree or not, it's really important to understand government, and there's nothing better. And I spent a little time in the Georgia legislature, but the illuminating part is the big picture. I remember Senator Nunn, the first thing he made everybody do was read Robert's Rules of Order. And that was I said, what in the world? But there was a method and a system to it.
Right. And that's how so many legislators, senators especially, have been so effective, is they know the rules. If you know the rules, you can run the show. Well, do you think it was easier to be a Senate staffer back then, or you think it's easier now?
Oh, Ashton, the difference between the staffers of when I was there, the 70s, and today, I have really not a hopeful observation of how these men and women in the Senate and the House are being advised, because some of them are so young and they're just not as disciplined as I thought all of us were under our legislative director. I see a dearth of of outside. Everybody's ready for the 5 o'clock cocktail hour instead of we got to be here till 8 o'clock. Or I mean, it's changed to me drastically.
Do you think that change has come from the bottom up, or do you think it's I don't know. Some would argue that the Senate and Congress doesn't quite function like it did when you were there with Senator Gambrell or Senator Nunn.
I think it's we're getting close to dysfunction. Okay, and it's really hard to watch.
Yeah.
It's especially one particular member of the Georgia delegation. Everybody asks me, and some of my work is very much in Dalton, Georgia, for over 25 years, and I can't explain why Marjorie Taylor Greene would get elected. But when you look at the people up there, it's a very conservative population, and no wonder. But that we can do better.
Well, so your work takes you back to Georgia?
Not as often as it used to. I've been working in solar energy at Dulles Airport for 4.5 years. So that's really carpet is. I've spent most of my career in carpet, in recycling. But no, I'm pretty much involved in solar energy right now.
Well, how'd you get involved in carpet? I mean, because that's such a, when you think of industry, Georgia industries, that's a quintessential Georgia industry, especially Northwest Georgia, as you mentioned.
Well, me and a guy looked at automating the sample industry.
Okay.
And we invented these machines to put a CD chip in a glue machine, and when a sample board goes through. So in the old days, they'd have a woman with a red slaughter back with hot melt adhesive going.
Okay.
And they're putting a carpet patch in there and said, we can do a lot better. So we invented these pretty automated machines.
Oh.
And we sold them to the carpet sample industry. And
okay.
Yeah, so I started in the sample industry.
Interesting. So you're the ones that look like little suitcases where you can just flip it?
Right.
That would, oh.
And they have to do, so say a company like Shaw Industries, they spend between $350 or $400 million a year on giving away carpet samples to see if people can see, they can touch it. I want to see the color. Those boards, and they give away, it's a really expensive thing to make.
Yeah.
And it's a marketing sales tool, but they have to have them. And every company in Dalton, Georgia has to have a sample book. Or the salesman, the marketing people can't go out and say, here's,
Marketing is not an expense, it's an investment.
Right.
I think I read that somewhere.
That's good.
Well, tell me, you've done a lot of work in green technology and sort of the transition to the green economy, so to speak, the long transition. Where was the green industry, green economy, and where are we now, and where are we headed from your perspective as somebody who's worked in the industry for a long time?
Well, I'm not going to get into the whole recycling part because that could be endless.
Yeah.
But on the solar panels, as recently as 3 years ago, most of the panels in the world were made in Taiwan or China or Japan. Now, in the last 2 years, Governor Kemp and his leadership team put together a brilliant company in Dalton and now in Cartersville, and they're the largest solar component company in North America. It's in Georgia. So we don't have to, at one point, solar panels were really hard to get, pricing was tough, availability was tough, but Georgia's really on the map on solar components. Well,
I saw some figure, it was maybe in the Washington Post or some major news outlet that was showing the future solar capacity, and it's just completely off the charts of how quickly most experts think solar energy and solar capacity and solar storage is going to be here before we know it. Is that something that
the storage is still, the new contract at Dulles is going to have something like 200 hours of backup solar energy. It took us 4 years to agree to a purchase power agreement with Dominion, but it's finally
And
been
Dominion's
done.
the
They're utility
company?
They're like the Georgia Power, the Southern Company. of
Say no
Virginia,
more.
And they're,
Okay.
And they got to be your partners because they're the provider to the airport. But
I see.
they're already big in solar, but this is a large-scale utility. This is 100 megawatts.
Wow.
The largest in the United States today is in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's only 40 megawatts. They've gotten bigger. So this is technically the largest solar airport, and it's going to not just power some of the airport, but also data centers.
Okay.
There's 127 data centers in Northern Virginia, enormous user of power.
Mm-hmm.
So Dominion looks brilliant. This will be a big development for Dulles. And they're green and sustainability.
Yeah, because if you know, I'm much more familiar with National Airport, but I've flown in and out of Dulles before, and I was shocked at how far away from DC Dulles actually is, but also how many corporate headquarters are out there, and
amazing.
And my father-in-law, who works for a defense contractor, when he has meetings, they literally just fly. You know, he flies into Dulles, stays at the Dulles airport, just because that's where everybody meets, is at that international airport. And I was just unaware of how big of a hub for business and industry the airport was. So you know, when I think most people, when they think of Northern Virginia, they think of Arlington, maybe Alexandria. But you know, if you just go out a little bit farther, you know, there's a whole other
Well, it's
hub of
larger
activity.
than the international airport, but it's years ago when they built it. I can't tell you the architect, but it's the concave.
Eero Saarinen.
Thank you.
There you go.
Aren't you doing your research? But it's considered not a wonder of the world, but it's a beautiful
It
architecture.
really is.
Yeah.
The only reason I know that is because he also designed the Gateway Arch in St. Louis,
Right.
where I was.
Okay.
I'm from Southern. I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan, so you know, one of the big treats is going up into the arch and feeling the wind blow, and it's less fun as an adult because these elevators are not built for grown people, especially not grown Ellett males. So yeah, Eero Saarinen, and then I was scrolling through TV and Die Hard 2 was on, and it's set at Dulles Airport. Yeah.
Well, another thing we did years ago when at the old decorator was Holland and Night, but they once banned airport de-icing fluid in Canada. Type 1 and Type 4, it created bio-oxygen deprivation, so a frog might grow 6 legs instead of 5 or 4. So Dulles, they were getting fined $10,000 a day.
Ooh.
So we came up with this vacuum trucks
Interesting.
system, and so when you have to spray an airplane, you got to de-ice, which is what is done, and then the water treatment plant then would say, you just had a huge de-icing event and our system's clogged. So they went to cleaning up more de-icing fluid and treating it, getting it, recycling it, and reusing it. You can it's the cost of recycling a 777 is $97,000. It's a big number.
I understood about 1/3 of what you said. What's 777?
An airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Boeing 777.
so you have to de-ice
I
an
see.
airplane. It's a function of the business, but I didn't realize.
Yeah,
the
those flaps need to
toxicity-
go up and down.
The toxicity in de-icing fluid.
Now, is that because it's sort of an antifreeze, or it is antifreeze?
It is basically
Okay.
an antifreeze. But Dulles, they way before the solar airport, they were on top of that. They were one of the first anaerobic kind of collection of airport de-icing fluid than I think any port in the United States. Now Dallas and Denver, everybody does it.
Right.
But I think, to me, Dulles did it really efficiently.
So that's the sort of industry
It was a
that
client for the firm.
Okay. Well, looking back on it, what advice, other than going to the Hill, because you've already given that piece of advice, what advice would you give to somebody who is interested in going into government service or wanting to join a staff on the Hill, whether it be a representative or a senator?
Well, I'll tell you, Margaret, my wife, had a nephew that came to town, and he was young, but like we all were, 27 years old or 25, and he said, I want to get a Senate job, and on a committee preferably, And Margaret, my wife, and I both of them said, Jimmy, you just don't walk in and get. He ended up with the senior senator from Maine, got him on, I think, the Senate Small Business Committee. And he went on, good kid, great guy, went on to finish law school. But that's the lucky one. To get a job, you have to know a lot of people that want to help you. A lot, and people will if they like you and they think you've got great aptitude and you're a good individual. But those jobs nowadays, they're important to have, but they're not easy to get.
Right. It takes a village.
It takes a village.
Well, anything else you'd like to record for posterity about Senator Gambrell or anything else?
We lost a good man, and he was a great senator, and I was lucky to work for him and meet his family.
Well, David Dunning, thank you so much on behalf of the Russell Library at the University of Georgia, the back-to-back college football national champions. Go Dogs. I think I'm contractually obligated to say
you
that.
Have to.
But if not, we should. We should be anyway. But thank you again, Dave. I'm glad we could finally get together and do this interview.
Ashton.